Let's get started. So there's a lot going on in the world. Today's subject matter does not deal with current events. So it's a little bit different than usual. It's going to be sort of a very high level, deep analytical discussion. If anyone has any questions about the Trump's nominee for Fed Chair, Kevin Warsh, or anything else that's more related to current events, we'll hold those for the Q&A afterwards. But I think what I'm going to discuss is a very important topic, so I don't want to postpone it. Might as well just jump into it today. So the title is I actually changed the title of it when I sent it out to you guys, but it deals with the tactics and the goals of Trump's grand global strategy. Question is, what is Trump trying to accomplish on the global stage? Is he trying to acquire more territory in the world by capturing Greenland and taking over Venezuela's oil industry? Is that what he's after? Does he just want US power because power is a worthy goal in its own right? If that's the case, wouldn't that make him similar to a Putin or a Xi Jinping? So the question is, what is Trump trying to accomplish? And this is an important question because he doesn't really tell us his goals. Trump is always ambiguous and he keeps everyone guessing. He keeps his friends guessing, he keeps his citizens guessing, and most importantly, he keeps his opponents and enemies guessing. So let's dig into this. There is the what Trump is trying to accomplish, right? And those are his goals. And there's also the how. How is he trying to accomplish these goals? In other words, what are the tactics he uses to try to accomplish his goals? So I'd like to begin with the how. How Trump tries to accomplish his goals. So what are his tactics? So first, it's important to know that Trump always floods the zone. He rushes out with a million different objectives, and he's trying to attack all these objectives all at once. And then just when you think he's done, the next day, he launches a new initiative. And the day after that, he launches yet another initiative. His approach seems to be, let's see what works, what has legs, what sticks. He fights with Powell and the Fed. And then he tries to fire Powell. And then he tries to fire Lisa Cook, who's also at the Fed. Then he brings a legal case against Lisa Cook. And then a few weeks later, he brings a legal case against Powell. And shortly after that, he says he wants to take over Greenland. And if necessary, he'll use military force. And then he pivots and he says, well, I won't use military force against Greenland, or maybe I will. And then he threatens tariffs on Europe if they don't turn over Greenland to the United States. And then he sends ice into Minnesota. And then he threatens new tariffs on South Korea. And of course, we can't forget Doge of last year, all the massive promises of huge government budget cuts. And then the tariffs on every single country in the world. He even launched tariffs on the poorest countries who we don't even trade with. He floods the zone. He doesn't stop. He is relentless, one initiative after another. On the issue of Greenland, would Trump seriously consider sending troops into Greenland Would he actually try to take it by force? No, it's not something that anyone should have taken seriously. But there's no doubt he had some people thinking about it. And he certainly terrified the European leaders. And even if they didn't think he'd actually do it, they were horrified by his threats. There was real concern that Trump was willing to blow up NATO, the most important military alliance in the world. And this alliance is key to stopping Russia's military aggression against Europe. Would Trump actually blow that alliance up? Now, the world thinks, what's wrong with this insane man? But somehow, this unbelievably chaotic, this shockingly aggressive and threatening approach works for him. At least in his view, it works for him. The question is, why does it work for him? Why does Trump like this chaotic approach so much? Sorry, guys, I need to mute everybody. Forgive me. Okay. So why does this approach work for Trump? Why does he like it so much? First, Trump likes to be the center of everything. He craves the attention, the fame, the power. He also loves the leverage it gives him. Every person in every country is always on the defense, always responding to him. If you take your eyes off of him for a second, you won't know what's going on in the world because every headline, every development is about him. Make no mistake, this is intentional. Yes, it's about the attention and the fame, but it's also about obtaining power and leverage over those he's dealing with and negotiating with. But that's not all. Trump is also has other factors in his mind when he uses these aggressive tactics. He's also thinking about management of his political coalition. He is obviously more concerned today than he was a year ago about the ultra MAGA wing of his coalition. Many in the extreme wing of MAGA have a goal that is to create a movement beyond Trump, after Trump. But Trump wants to control the entire movement. He doesn't want to let the extreme MAGA wing get away from him. It seems pretty clear that the extreme wing of MAGA are trying to split the MAGA movement. Now, Tucker Carlson is clearly the leader of the extreme wing, but there's also Steve Bannon, Candace Owens, and others who are trying to play a role, like Megyn Kelly, and still others. But Trump needs to keep this movement under his control, at least for now. And who knows, maybe Trump will want to take control over MAGA even beyond his presidency. Similar to Obama, right? Obama remained the most powerful actor in the Democratic Party, at least through the last election, and maybe even till this day. Now, the ultra MAGA movement wing is thinking, why did Trump even go to Davos to hobnob with the global elites? Why did he do this? What's Trump doing intervening in Venezuela and Iran? Is this really America first? Why is he bothering working with Israel? What's he doing trying to rebuild Gaza? Trump's international activism creates problems for him within the extreme wing of MAGA. His threats to take military action in Greenland were not only a negotiating tactic, and maybe a bad negotiating tactic, and I'll get to that soon. But on the other hand, making NATO countries freak out and making the global elites panic goes down very well in the extreme wing of the MAGA movement. If we're getting involved internationally, the extreme wing of MAGA might accept it if we're doing so, if it's to expand our borders, and if we're seizing Venezuela's oil. Now that sounds more like America first, right? Expanding borders, gaining more territory, getting access to oil. And if we cause the global elites to have an emotional meltdown in the process, even better. So Trump satisfies his need to maintain his political coalition through these apparent crazy tactics. But, and this is a big but, threatening military intervention in Greenland was not a good negotiating tactic. There are actually good strategic reasons for Greenland to be under US control rather than under Denmark's control. And it would probably be better for those in Greenland as well, for the US to have more control. If you're afraid of Russia and if you're afraid of China, as Greenlanders should be, would you rather be under Denmark and Europe's care or under direct US care? It seems pretty obvious. You'd rather be under US protection. But Trump's military threats against Greenland have left a bitter taste in the mouths of the Greenlanders and their leaders. Having good discussions, logical discussions, convincing discussions, and maybe offering a little bit of honey along the way, that would have been a far more effective strategy than military threats and threats of new tariffs against Europe. Trump turned Greenland into a contentious issue, and it didn't need to be that way. Greenlanders may have preferred the US, but less so right now. And yes, it seems like Trump was able to strike a deal, but the US probably could have come out with an even better deal for both us and for Greenland. So this situation with Greenland is actually reminiscent of Canadian elections last year. In 2025, Mark Carney, who won those elections, was running against Pierre Poilievre. Pierre Poilievre had a massive lead at one point in the polls against Carney. Poilievre is a pro-American conservative, very friendly to Trump, at least aligned with Trump, and he would have been a phenomenal ally to the United States. But back during those elections, Trump's mantra was, Canada will become the 51st state. And he began calling the prime minister from those days, Trudeau, he began calling Prime Minister Trudeau a governor, like he was a US governor, like Canada was just another state in the United States. The result of that Canada bashing was that the Canadians turned against Poilievre and the vote swung towards Carney, and Carney ultimately won those elections. Why? Because the Canadians saw Poilievre, who was a conservative, aligned with Trump, as kind of a Trump lapdog. So why did Trump make such a blunder? Why did Trump make such a blunder? Trump likes fame. He likes to be the center of attention. He likes to be in the news every day. And these tactics, these antics, got him so much attention. Not only that, the extreme MAGA wing loved it. They were eating it up. But there was a heavy cost, and the cost was Trump lost the opportunity to have a great ally as the Prime Minister of Canada. And instead, we have Mark Carney, who's absolutely uncooperative, and we have a very contentious relationship with Canada. And that is unfortunate. And it didn't have to be that way. So we understand the how. That is, we understand how Trump goes about trying to achieve his goals. We understand his tactics. We now understand why he chooses these tactics which so many people see as ugly. So let's just quickly summarize what we learned. He floods the zone. He creates confusion. Most importantly, confusion among those he's negotiating with. And this gives him power and leverage over them. That's first. Second, he loves being the center of attention. He does. We can't deny it. He's got a big ego. He loves being in the news every single day. It satisfies a deep urge for him. And third, his extreme tactics shore up his support base in the extreme wing of the MAGA movement. And in his view, it's very important for him to maintain this coalition for now and for the future. Now, there's a cost, right? Sometimes his excessively aggressive tactics have unintended costly consequences, like they did in Canada, like they probably did in Greenland. So now let's turn to the what. That is, what is Trump's goal? We know his tactics, but what is the big picture here? What is it that Trump is trying to achieve on the global stage? Now, we're going to need to take a brief look back at history. Okay, this is going to be a somewhat involved history. Bear with me. We're going to return to Trump soon, but these historical facts are critical to understanding what Trump is trying to accomplish here. So let's go back to 1945. The US has just won World War II, and the US was constructing a new world order to counter the Soviet Union in order to stop the spread of communism. From 1945 until 1990, it was what's known as a bipolar world. Two dominant superpowers determining the world order. Now, generally speaking, all the other countries in the world were either under the Soviet sphere of influence or under the US sphere of influence. And any country that was not solidly in one of these two spheres, in one of these two camps, any country that was not solidly in one of these two spheres of influence, they were an object of competition between the two superpowers. And the question was, who would become the more influential power in the world, the US or the Soviet Union? And by the way, those countries that were not firmly under one of these two spheres of influence were up for grabs. So Vietnam, Nicaragua, Chile, El Salvador, and many others were battlegrounds for competition between the United States and the Soviet Union. By 1990, the United States had won, with communist dictatorships collapsing almost everywhere. Not everywhere, but most countries abandoned their communist dictatorships. And we entered a unipolar world. There was just one hegemon, the United States. The thinking was democracy and free markets would now inevitably spread to every corner of the world. The world would become a collection of nations that got along, cooperative democracies, and the UN would be the perfect body where international cooperation could be achieved, each nation pursuing its own interest, but through rational dialogue and compromise. This idealistic vision of a cooperative world dates all the way back to Woodrow Wilson, who was highly influential in creating the League of Nations in 1918. And the League of Nations was the predecessor to the United Nations. So this was Woodrow Wilson's vision, a cooperative world where every nation worked together at the League of Nations, which became the United Nations. And then FDR held the vision of international cooperation as well, years later. Now, this vision of global cooperation, peaceful coexistence, that was born under Woodrow Wilson and nurtured under FDR, was finally brought to fruition under Barack Obama. But it didn't work out. Why didn't it work out? The other influential countries in the world, the European countries, China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Qatar, and others, they had other ideas. Let's begin with Europe. Europe experienced what's known as a post-national moment, which it continues to embrace to this very day. A post-national moment. What does that mean? European countries became afraid of the concept of a nation state. They became afraid of nationalism for two reasons. Number one, Germany historically had been the most powerful nation in Europe, and it had done terrible damage with its power. As a nation, it had a long history of being an aggressor, of being a conqueror. So among European countries, there was a strong desire to restrain and even dilute the German identity. So that's one reason why Europe had this goal of eliminating national identity, fear of Germany. Second reason why they turned against nationalism. After World War II, European nations were devastated economically and militarily, and they never regained their stature. As a result, nationhood no longer served their self-interest on the global stage. If Europe was to regain relevance and influence on the global stage, they would have to abandon their nationalism and merge as a reconstituted entity, one unified entity known as the European Union, right? So France on its own would not be a power on the global stage. Germany alone would not be a power on the global stage. The United Kingdom on its own would not be a power on the global stage. To become a great power, they decided to abandon their nationalism and become European. Now, the Europeans never admitted any of this. Instead, they sold this vision of abandoning nationalism and embracing a more universal, more inclusive European identity to their people and to the world as the pursuit of the highest moral standard. They said and still say, nationalism divides us. By abolishing nationalism and abolishing nations, we become one people. One people much more capable of cooperation and achieving peace. So this should not only be a European objective, it should be a global objective. This idea of nation states, of national identity, is divisive. We should all fall under the umbrella of one people. And we're starting in Europe by abolishing a German identity, a French identity, right? A Spanish identity. We're creating an all-inclusive European identity, and this should continue to broaden out and eventually encompass all the nations of the world. They quickly came to believe what they were selling. We are all one. And to a large extent, this explains their open borders policies, right? The European open borders policies of allowing a flood of immigrants into European countries. Interesting to note, the left wing in the United States embraces these same ideas. One reason why European elites and the left in the United States despises Israel is because Israel has a strong identity. It doesn't adopt this everyone is the same, one global citizen ideology. The European elites and the radical left in the United States also have a natural sympathy and even an attraction to communism because communist ideology is also anti-nationalist. The communist movement believes in one world order, no religion, no nation state. Your loyalty should only be to the Communist Party. The concept of statehood is seen as temporary. It's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is one communist world. So here's a question. Why don't the Europeans and the left also dislike Muslim Arab countries? Because Muslim Arab countries don't have this vision of we're all good, we're all the same, everyone is equal. There's one reason why the Europeans dislike Israel, and they have no problems and even an affection for the Muslim Arab world. And the reason is the following. Because the radical Muslim Arab world, they are also helping to destroy what the Europeans and the left wing view as an archaic system of nation states, right? The Arab world wants to blow the world order to pieces. So there is a natural alliance between Europe, the left in the United States, and Islam. All share the same near-term objective of destroying the nation state. They have different end games of what the New World Order should ultimately look like. But the first objective is to destroy nation states, to destroy national identities that they share. And therefore, there is a tacit alliance between these groups, between Europe, the left wing, and Islam. So that's the reason why Russia, China, Iran, and the Muslim Brotherhood and the left are all on the same page and supportive of one another. From the Obama presidency forward, these influences, which I just discussed, have chipped away at U.S. hegemony, at U.S. dominance in the world. They've chipped away at U.S. influence. And as a consequence, U.S. influence on the world stage has diminished. It's diminished at home, and it's diminished internationally. It's diminished in the UN. It's diminished in the IMF. These influences have chipped away at our culture in the United States and Western culture more broadly. We see the creeping influence, and maybe it's not so creeping anymore, of China, Russia, the Islamists, and the radical left. And the US has been backsliding. And the European Union and Canada are not reliable partners. And Trump points this out on a regular basis. On the international stage, China, Russia, Iran took over Venezuela. They took over Nicaragua. They gained influence in Panama. And the US passively watched, but did nothing. So Trump is attempting to restore US hegemony. And that's a good thing. The goal is good for the United States. It's good for the West. It's good for the world. Trump wants Europe to be strong. He wants Europe to be reliable partners. But Europe has not been pro-Western, and it hasn't been pro itself. Again, this is something that Trump pounded the table on in his Davos speech. And neither is Canada, right? Canada has not been pro-West or pro itself. Trump wants good, strong, independent, capable allies that can defend themselves and promote Western values in the world. Trump knows that the US cannot do it by itself, and we need allies, but we need reliable allies. The Trump administration has subtly sent the message, and I say subtly because they're quiet about it, but if you listen carefully, they say it very clearly. And the reason why I'm going to tell you what I'm about to say in a minute, the reason they're quiet about it is because they know the extreme wing of MAGA doesn't like it. So what is it they're quiet about? That Israel is the ideal ally. Even J.D. Vance says, when he speaks to the Europeans, we want you to be more like Israel. What does that mean? Israel has a strong identity, a strong national identity. They have a strong military. They can fight against their enemies in their region. They have an incredibly capable military, not Europe. And that's why Trump keeps urging Europe to increase their spending on their military. Trump is telling Europe, get your individual identity back. Get your culture back. Stand up for yourselves. We are not going to bail you out because we can't bail you out, right? If you are in a town with 1,000 drunks, you can't save 1,000 drunks. The drunks have to save themselves. It's no different here. As much as we'd love to bail Europe out, we can't. It's impossible. Europe needs to do it themselves. We can support them. We can help them as much as possible, but only they can save themselves. But Trump is saying, we obviously can't trust you with Greenland. Look at your track record. Trump is saying, yes, we are America first, but you should be Europe first. But you're not. You don't even know what you stand for anymore. If you behave as nation states, if you behave as a collection of nations, if you stand for what you once were, which is a nation of Western values, you'll see that we have a lot in common and we can get a lot done in this world together. That's the ultimate goal. So Trump's ultimate goals are absolutely right. His tactics, well, sometimes they gain him power and leverage to achieve his goals. Sometimes they blow up in his face and have unintended consequences and do more harm than good. But somehow Trump's big objective, he's got it right. He's got it right much more than Biden had it right. And actually, Biden had it quite wrong. He sees it far more clearly than Obama, and perhaps more than any president that we've had in a long, long time. Yes, the tactics can be problematic, but the goal is absolutely right. So we kept it short and sweet. I hope that resonated. I hope you guys understood. There was some deep history there. But anyway, let's see if there are comments, questions, and questions can be on anything, guys. It doesn't necessarily have to be on this topic.
Seth.
Yes.
Seth.
Is that
I had a
Alan?
question. Yeah, Alan. Do you support a stronger dollar or a weaker dollar, or are you just neutral about the whole value
So
of the dollar?
let's cover the arguments
I mean, that's
for
off your subject today, but anyway.
let's
bit.
cover the arguments of why a weak dollar, why some people favor a weak dollar, and why some people favor a strong dollar. And then I'll give you my bottom line. Guys, I'm gonna try to mute this again. Okay. Why do some people say a weak dollar is good? And we know that Trump is sympathetic and not unhappy with a weak dollar. The argument goes that when you have a weaker dollar, it makes your exports more competitive in the world because they become less expensive for other people to buy. And it also makes imports more expensive, right? Because a weaker dollar makes it more costly for us to buy goods from abroad. Why is that good? Because it could lead new companies to come into formation, to be formed, that would replace those goods that we import. So overall, it's good for the U.S. economy, right? That's the argument. The problem with that theoretical argument is it actually doesn't hold. It doesn't work. We've had a much, much weaker dollar. If you were to go back to the Obama administration, guys, the early years of the Obama administration, right now, euro dollar trades at, let's say, roughly 119. In the Obama years, it went all the way to 150. Okay. The dollar crashed, collapsed, right? This was after the great financial crisis. Our interest rates were at zero. We were printing a ton of money. Did that help our export sector? It didn't. It didn't do anything. New firms come into existence to replace uh, imported goods? No, it didn't happen. So it works in the textbooks. It does not work in reality. If you look around the world and look at countries with a weak currency, you do not find booming economies. You do not find booming export sectors. This is an argument that exists in theory only. In practice, it doesn't work. It just doesn't. The empirical data shows that this is a theoretical view that that just doesn't hold true in the real world. What creates great exports are great companies, right? Productivity, good products. A weaker exchange rate is no substitute for that. Now, let's talk about the cost of a weaker dollar. The cost of a weaker dollar is, and a dollar that's depreciating. The United States, unfortunately, the US government, that is, relies on borrowing to fund itself. Our government issues a lot of debt, and a lot of that debt is purchased by foreigners because there's not enough domestic institutions to buy all the bonds that we issue, all the debt that we issue. If foreigners think that our currency is going on a downward spiral, and you're only getting 4% on your US Treasury bond, but you think the currency is going to depreciate, why are you going to buy a US Treasury bond? Why are you going to lend money to the US government? You won't. You're going to require a much higher interest rate to lend to the United States. So that would mean interest rates need to rise if we're going to have a weakening dollar. So the cost benefit analysis, so I'm giving you the bottom line, the cost benefit analysis does not work. A weak dollar is not a great trade-off for the United States. Um, Anything else I can say on that subject? I don't think so. I think I covered it thoroughly. Any follow-ups on that? Now, the only other thing I'll say is Trump would be fine with a weaker dollar. In fact, maybe he prefers it. But I want to make it clear, despite all the rumors, there's nothing that the US government has been doing to actively weaken the dollar. And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent just said a couple days ago that all the policies that the US government is pursuing are supportive of a strong dollar. And he said we have not changed our preference for a strong dollar. So that's important to note.
Hey, Seth, you talked a little bit in Telegram about the new Fed nominee. And so maybe if you have anything else to say about that. And then, last 2 days, the market has sold off. And I saw with the earnings on Wednesday that I think both Meta and Microsoft beat on earnings, but the Microsoft, or maybe I'm getting it backwards, but one of them went way down and the other one went way up in trading, at least, after hours. And the concern seemed to be that, again, kind of the AI bubble thing, that they were putting too much money into certain elements. Is that why I think it was sold off the Microsoft, was it? Or did I
Yes.
reverse it? Was
So
it Meta sold off or Microsoft?
Microsoft sold off. Okay. So let's first cover Kevin Warsh and then we'll go to the earnings. So Kevin Warsh has served on the Fed before. So he has a track record. And his track record is that of perhaps the most hawkish Fed member in recent history. By hawkish meaning he has a preference for keeping interest rates high, and he's very much against quantitative easing. Quantitative easing is when, the United States has a horrendous recession like we did in 2020, or the great financial crisis of 2008. He is against money printing. And you won't find too many people who have worked at the Fed being against money printing under those extreme circumstances. So we know Trump likes low interest rates, and Trump certainly didn't oppose money printing when we're faced with financial collapse. So why would Trump choose the most hawkish Fed member in recent history to be the next Fed chair? It makes zero sense. And I think reason number one is Trump doesn't understand. He doesn't understand who he just picked. And the only reason why markets are down today is because Kevin Warsh was selected. That's the only reason. The market would be up today otherwise. So why did Trump choose this guy? Okay, fine. I said he doesn't understand and he doesn't understand. But the reason I think Trump selected Warsh is number one, he's known him for a long time. They have a personal relationship. Trump actually almost chose him the last time when he got to choose the Fed chair. Instead, he went with Jay Powell, which was the safer choice back then. So they have a personal relationship, but I think much more important than their personal relationship, and it's not they're not like buddies, they don't hang out. He knows them. More importantly, Scott Bessent used to work under Stan Druckenmiller. Stan Druckenmiller is probably the best hedge fund manager of modern times. So Bessent used to work for Stan Druckenmiller. Kevin Warsh currently works with Stan Druckenmiller. He's a partner at Stan Druckenmiller's family office where he, runs his own money. So Kevin Warsh helps him out with that. So there's a common link. Scott Bessent is Treasury Secretary. Scott Bessent is close with Stan Druckenmiller. Kevin Warsh is close with Stan Druckenmiller. Bessent clearly convinced Trump to hire Kevin Warsh. Now, why would Scott Bessent do this? That, to me, is a puzzle. I'm sure Kevin Warsh made promises to Trump, promises that he probably won't keep because once he's at the Fed, he has his independence. We know what his core beliefs are. He's going to be hawkish. And but for some reason, Bessent wanted Warsh there. Now, maybe Bessent wanted Warsh there because the alternatives were highly problematic. So what is it that Scott Bessent may have feared? He may have feared that anyone else would have been easily pushed around by Trump. So Scott Bessent has a dual loyalty. And I'm hypothesizing. I don't know any of this. I'm hypothesizing. Scott Bessent wants to do the best he can for the president, but he also wants to ensure that the Fed remains independent. And under anyone else, maybe Bessent feared that the Fed would lose its independence, and then Trump would have really had a massive, massive problem. So maybe he believes that the real loyal thing to do for the Trump presidency is to appoint someone who's fiercely independent. So I'm speculating. I don't know, but all I can tell you is Kevin Warsh is hawkish. And he's actually too hawkish for my tastes. He scares me a little bit. He's so hawkish. But um, but that's who Kevin Warsh is. Okay, and that's why the market's down today. And that's why the dollar is rallying today. And that's why gold is down today. And that's why silver is crashing today. Because Warsh is hawkish. And the idea that the next Fed chair would be run super easy monetary policy, cut interest rates, do whatever Trump wanted, that idea has just exploded. And silver is crashing. Gold is, because these are like the easy money trades. Buy gold because the next head of the Fed is going to do whatever Trump wants, right? So that trade is being undone right now. Okay. Now going to your earnings question. Let me first
Can
say,
I ask just a little follow-up question there?
Yeah.
So, you spoke many times in the past that, with Powell and Trump being antagonistic, that Powell is the head, but they all vote. So with Warsh, if he's hawkish, but the rest of the Fed wants to cut the rates, he only gets one vote, right? Even though he's the head, he wouldn't get more votes, right? Kind of how you explained with Powell. Same thing.
here's the thing with Warsh. He's been at the Fed before. He's highly respected. If you put Kevin Hassett at the Fed, who's Trump's personal advisor, the other Fed members have no respect for Hassett. They would have overruled him. Warsh is a serious guy. He's going to be viewed as independent, and he's going to have more legitimacy, more credibility at the Fed. Now, Warsh is not going to come in there and irresponsibly vote to cut interest rates. My worry is actually goes the other way, that if we need rate cuts, the other Fed members are going to have to drag him there. And it won't be easy because they're going to respect him. My worry is he's going to go the other way. He's going to be very hawkish, reluctant to cut interest rates. He could see the economy slowing and he could be, let it go into a recession. That's my concern. And that's why the market is selling off today.
So will then Trump get mad at him and go through the same cycle he's gone with Powell, or would that make sense?
Oh, if Warsh starts being too hawkish for Trump's, to Trump versus Trump's likings, we're going to hear about it. Trump's not going to keep that to himself. But it doesn't. Who cares? So what? Warsh. Now it won't matter because Warsh will be completely untouchable once he's at the Fed. I mean, Trump just appointed the guy.
And the sell-off, the current sell-off, the last few days, if it's a reaction to him being nominated,
Today's sell-off is Warsh. Yesterday, we didn't know Warsh was going to be the guy. We found out last night after the market was closed. So today's sell-off is specifically about Warsh.
But you perceive that as short-term, right? It just kind of a little bit of a panic,
Right.
it'll bounce back.
Yes, I think it'll bounce back. I think the market will quickly, look past this. And honestly, Warsh is going to want, I mean, I gave you the hawkish case on Warsh because he has been a hawk. As Fed chair, it's one thing to be a voter and sound hawkish and be a tough guy. It's another thing when the responsibility is yours and you start to see an economic slowdown and you see layoffs perhaps creeping up. Is he really going to stick to a hawkish ideology when it's really It's his responsibility. It'll be on him if he causes a recession. I think he'll end up being very pragmatic. That's what I would say. I think he's a pragmatic guy. He's very well connected on Wall Street. Um, he's going to get a lot of good opinions. He's not just going to rely on the Fed's internal research. Look to outside sources. I think he'll be, I think he'll be a very sound manager at the Fed. Let me go to your second question. First, let me say that Microsoft, basically, I mentioned this on the chat. Someone asked me a few days ago, shouldn't we buy the stock market before corporate earnings, especially like the Mag 7, because the Mag 7 always blows away uh, earnings, and then the market rallies after Mag 7 companies report. And my comment was actually, it's usually the opposite. Usually the Mag 7 report, they blow away earnings, but there's something that the investors nitpick and you get a market sell-off after Mag 7 reports. And then the market recovers. It goes on to make new highs because the overall economic data is so good. And that's what we saw. So now let's go to yesterday. Why did the market sell off yesterday? And it was related to Microsoft to some extent, because we also had, a lot of rumors uh, about a coming war with Iran. Um, but what is it? I don't think this is an AI concern now. I think it's just Microsoft is spending a ton of money. Their earnings were blowout. They were great, but they're just spending massive, massive amounts of money. And the question is, are they just overdoing it? Are they overdoing it, and their spending plans, well into the future are extremely high? So the concern is, you're sitting on this large cash stockpile. You're running it down. Are you actually going to start to maybe borrow money to invest? So it's just more of a concern is, it's not, no one's doubting the AI story at the moment. That happened at the end of last year. You're not hearing those doubts at the moment. But it's just you're just perhaps spending way too much. Maybe you're overdoing it. Now, my feeling is, as always happens in recent quarters, you get a brief sell-off as a result of this, and then a couple months later, all these companies are making new highs again. And I think we're probably going to see a repeat with this theme with Microsoft. So nothing here concerns me. As I've said in the past, I don't think anyone understands the industry better than the people who work at these companies. They understand it better than any investor, than any Wall Street analyst who covers these companies. I think these companies are on the ball. They understand the power of AI better than anybody. And I'm confident that they're doing the right thing. And ultimately, the market will continue to reward them as the market has done. Maybe not on the days following the earnings release, but in the weeks and months to come, the market rewards them.
Even today, Microsoft is down, but it's down less than the NASDAQ and SPY indexes as a whole.
Right. Exactly right. Okay. Anybody else? Questions, comments?